Today we're making a safe space for immigrants through honest conversation. My name is Rich Too for MTV, and this is First Gen Conversation. This show originates from the podcast First Generation Burden, which I've hosted since 2016, and highlights immigrants in the creative community through a series of honest conversations. In the 4 years since, we've seen troubling stories and reports about social injustice towards immigrant communities, and this show was created as a safe space where open conversation can happen and vulnerability and pride about where you come from are valued. Also, I myself identify as a first-gen immigrant. My parents came to the United States from the Philippines before I and my siblings were born in order to build a better life for themselves. And that's a story that's very familiar to our guests and many of you watching and listening at home. The definition of a first-generation immigrant can be one of two things: an immigrant born abroad or the child of an immigrant born in the target country, for our purposes the United States, and there is no broad agreement on which definition to use. Today, we'll be talking to producer Alysha Lalji, whose family hails from India, and MTV News correspondent Dometi Pongo, whose family hails from Ghana in West Africa. Well, first up, we have Alysha Lalji. Alicia, it's great to have you. What's up?
Not much. Enjoying this. It's been great so far.
Awesome. So would love for you to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
I'm first generation Indian American. My parents are from Mumbai. It was still Bombay when they left India. And they moved to the US like right before I was born. And then about a year later, my brother was born, and we all grew up in Dallas, Texas, which is super fun. And then I moved to New York to go to college, and I've been here ever since. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about some of the challenges or experiences really from your parents coming from different communities within the Indian community, because that's a unique combination of elements, and I know that you have a lot of experiences with that. I think Indians they're a really diverse group of people, and so not only in terms of religion but also regionally, people have a lot of regional pride, whether they're Gujarati or Sindhi. In my case, my dad is Muslim and my mom is half Hindu, half Zoroastrian, and Zoroastrians are also known as Parsis. And
very ancient religion.
Yeah, I had this really interesting upbringing because not only was I an Indian American in the United States, but I didn't have like a specific experience as an Indian American. So like, for example, I would go to the Jamaat, which is another word for a mosque, on Fridays, and then I'd hang out with all of the Parsi kids who were like, my homies. And then if you came back to my house, it's like a lot of Hindu deities and stuff. So it was just sort of this really interesting experience. And I didn't know a lot of Indians growing up who actually shared that kind of a cultural experience within our own community. So it was pretty cool.
So I want to talk about the American dream and also the sacrifice of the parents. So this entire time we've been talking about the journey that it takes to get to this moment now. Can you speak a little bit about what that meant for yourself and your parents?
The American dream is something that, it's really beautiful. I think it's like this really optimistic concept. And I love the idea that it's so aspirational. And I definitely think that for my parents, that was something that gave them a lot of motivation when things got tough. But it's also like a really flawed ideology in so many ways.
Very flawed.
It's super flawed, yeah. And so, I think especially right now, I really feel like the idea of the American dream has been weaponized in so many ways. And I feel like I've been talking to a lot of people about this. Like there are two conversations, right? So there's a conversation around immigrants who can come to the United States maybe with like a multinational corporation, and they have a lot of access and privilege, and we call those people expats, and they're inspiring. And then there are people who are really just trying to make it, and they might not have the same access to privilege and opportunity that others do, and they come to the United States and really try to make it work. And the language around and the discriminatory language around those people is pretty tough, right? So
like to even get here, you have to have so many resources. Like imagine what it takes, what the cost of travel is. I'm talking to the audience. Like imagine the cost of travel to go abroad, and we're living here. But imagine what it's like being the other way. It's unbelievable.
It's crazy, yeah, and it takes so much. It's like I don't know if I have that kind of courage, to be perfectly honest. And so. But I think it's really important because when we talk about this access to privilege and who gets to be an American and who gets to appreciate the American dream or experience it for themselves, I think that, there's a lot of classism in that conversation, right? So like we talk a lot about the unfortunate racism and xenophobia sometimes in our immigration conversations, but there's also classism. And, I think that when we have these like policy level discourses about the American dream and who gets to experience it, people forget that we're talking about real human beings and our words have real consequences. And so I think people make incredible sacrifices. My parents changed my life because they made a decision. And I hope more people get the opportunities that I did and my brother did as well.
I think that immigrants are unique in that, they're often the most patriotic of Americans because of the sacrifice and what it takes to physically get here, like from an energy standpoint, a resources standpoint, and also just the uprooting, like to your point too, in this pandemic when we all had to make a hard left turn, a lot of times I would think like, wow, my parents did this even harder, or they had to uproot their entire lives for reasons, beyond their control. So who am I to complain right now? It's an interesting conversation about privilege,
I know my parents are like, it's sort of incredible because they really exist in two spaces. They're extremely proud of their Indian culture, and I think it's something that they hold on to because you can lose it, right? It's easy to see that go. To be honest, I don't really speak Hindi, partly because I'm terrible at all languages. So like, it's, it's just like, oh, but, I think you can kind of see that with time, it's easy to lose that. But at the same time, they're so proud of being American, and it's because they worked really, really hard to be here. And I feel the same way, right? Like I'm an American. I grew up here. I'm really proud of my life, but I'm also really proud that I have this really special identity and I have this other facet of my identity that I get to explore.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, the immigrant term is something, it implies geography, implies location, but really anyone can fit under that umbrella based on a set of parameters, So yeah, I totally hear you. I want to talk one last thing as we're winding down on this segment. So your history in sport, there's something really interesting about your family where your grandfather was the manager of India's first Olympic team. That's dope. And also you recently ran the New York City Marathon, which I have never done and I have no plans to do, and I applaud everyone that has, so applause to you. I just want to hear about your passion in sport, your history in sport, and also national pride in that space.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun because I have like two teams to root for whenever like the Olympics are on, so it's really kind of cool. And I also want to be clear, I ran the marathon, but people could have definitely walked it faster than I ran it. Like I am not a fast runner. And yeah, it's really kind of funny because, and I think those are the stories that kind of connect you back to your heritage is, the really incredible things that my ancestors accomplished, right? And so for me, I actually ran the marathon, funny enough, because I thought I wasn't athletic. And so it was like, I needed to prove something to myself that I was capable and strong, and I had the mental fortitude to be bored for the hours that it takes to run a marathon. And so, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And I don't know, I guess, maybe I'm more connected to my ancestors than I realize sometimes.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It was awesome to have you. And now we have a special guest, Dometi Pongo. He's an MTV news correspondent and also the host of True Life Crime for MTV. And for Smithsonian Channel, he recently did Conversations in Context with Lonnie Bunch. So everybody give it up for Dometi Pongo. Everyone, welcome. Digital cheers.
Rich, thank you for having me. And I gotta say, before we get started, these conversations have just been phenomenal to watch. I've been taking notes about just interesting ideas that folks have been sharing. So yeah, I'm really privileged to be a part of this right now.
Oh, dude, well, game recognized game. And let me tell you, when we were doing our pre-interview, this is totally like off script right now, but we were doing our pre-interview. I practiced so hard for you just to make sure that I was like, I want to be on Dometi's level. I gotta make sure. I haven't seen him in office in a while.
No, thank you. And just so you know, I'm for real. I'm literally taking notes. So, good stuff, man. This is awesome.
Appreciate you. So let's officially begin the conversation. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from. We have a lot to get to, and also a great opportunity to get to know someone who really, has given us life for a long time. So, appreciate you for that.
Thank you. I'm the son of West African immigrants, two older sisters, born in Chicago on Chicago's South Side, and my parents immigrated here from Ghana. Grew up on Chicago's South Side up until junior high and high school, where I lived in Calumet City, went to Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, where I studied economics before life threw me in the world of broadcasting.
Oh, wow. I mean, that journey is amazing. And also, you've covered so much ground with content and also, with actually telling a personal story. That's amazing. I want to talk a little bit about how that journey, kind of came to be within that space, because I think journalism as well as, the entertainment industry really are atypical pursuits within the immigrant community. I would love to hear a little bit about that, what your family's perception of all that was, and also, how you went from econ to radio to on screen.
Yeah, what Tom said was right on point, man. When it comes to immigrant families, you're either a doctor, you're a lawyer, or you're an engineer. And so, my dad and mom were no different. And I was always interested in the arts. My big sister grew up in the 90s, was a teenager in the 90s during the hip hop backpack era. And she used to take me to the open mics, took me everywhere. Like I was like attached at the hip. And I developed a love for hip hop. And I was 6 years old when I tried to write my first verse with her help. And for as long as I can remember, that's what I was known for. I was the kid at the lunchroom tables while my guys were playing with the forks and spoons, making the beats. I was the one hitting the freestyles, making everybody go crazy. And I thought that that's where my life would be. But for my family, I had to find a way to figure out a path that made sense for them. College was something that they expected us all to do. So when I went to college and decided not to do medicine, I was like, well, what can I do that conveys that I take my education serious, that still has some sort of academic rigor? And I landed on economics, and I'm like, yo, Dad, I'm studying economics. That's cool. He's like, oh, a lot of math. That's good. And so I'm like, all right, cool. So, I did economics, and following, undergrad, I ended up working as a business analyst at Target headquarters, and I loved the culture of the company, but I hated the job. I hated living in Minneapolis, which was a small, not diverse city. I hated the culture of wearing a suit every day to work, and I hated feeling like I had to compress elements of who I was to fit in with everybody else at the office, and so I quit without a plan, and I went home and lived with my parents and said, listen, I tried it the right way. Can I just try things my way and see what happens? I ended up enrolling into this broadcasting vocational school and interning at a Black-owned radio station on Chicago's South Side called WVON. The day I started, the previous news anchor put in his 2-week notice by some stroke of just stars aligning. And my mom said, the synergy, yes, absolutely. And I told my mom, I said, yo, it's crazy. The news anchor left. And she said, you should apply. I was like, that's not how this industry works. You just don't apply for these jobs. She was like, why not? I can't do that. She said, why can't you? And it was the first time that my mom was actually like, try it. You ain't doing nothing else. So I applied for it, and I actually became a news anchor, then later on news director. What ended up happening was they had this end of year special they would do where you wrapped up all of the big news stories that affected Black Chicago and Black America, and they needed someone to write them. And I just stepped into all of these roles like gung-ho.
I want to call out specifically one moment within the Conversations in Context show on Smithsonian, which you recently did with Lonnie Bunch. You drew a fascinating parallel with the incarceration of Meek Mill to the incarceration of Leadbelly, the African-American folk singer. And I was like, wow, Dometi is like the only person that I could see make that connection where it's, journalism, activism, but also, pop culture sensibility. Can you tell us a little bit about how all those points converge for you? Because it feels you have such a unique mix.
Man, I love this question so much because I've had to give it a lot of thought about how did those things kind of mold into my personality and into my work. And I think it started with a Black Studies professor named Howard Ramsey, Dr. Ramsey, who used to, he showed us, Langston Hughes books. Like a lot of these books here came from Dr. Ramsey from undergrad. And he would show us these books, but then he'd also say he was fascinated that I was like a 4.0 student who was also cool on campus, who was also a rapper, and these dual identities that you usually don't see. Usually it was the nerdy kids who was interested in chess like I was, not also the MC who also went to all the parties and still turned my papers in. And so he was like, yo, I'm doing an exhibit about Black men and creativity. Can I see your books? And so he sent me, he asked me for my notebooks. I love handwritten notes. And yeah, I gave him my notebooks, and he took pictures of my notebooks and did a display, like a museum exhibit at school, where he put my notebooks, other young men who created things in class, and juxtaposed them against poems from Langston Hughes, Amiri Baraka, and all of these other like artists who are established and like real artists. And I asked him why he did that. He said, Black men don't often see that young Black men don't see that our stories connect to the larger diaspora. Like what I'm doing, he said, what you're doing and what you're writing is no different than what Langston was writing when he was your age. And so he helped me to see that, man, there are connections from folk music to today. Like James Brown and the grunts and those guttural sounds he makes in his music are very similar to the sounds that Young Thug makes in his music. And a lot of people call Young Thug's music mumble rap, but when you actually listen to it, those rhythms harken back to African culture, the drum in African culture, and artists like James Brown. So when it came to Leadbelly, I thought about incarcerated musicians and how that becomes a part of their narrative, especially in hip hop. And Leadbelly, if he was born in a different time, he would have been Tupac, he would have been an MC. And so that's kind of, that professor really opened that up to me and allowed me to see myself in the larger context of Black American history.
Personally, for me, I'm not ashamed to say that there's a lack of representation of Asians within all of media overall. I'm not at all, quiet about that. But I think what is interesting is your name. You had a convergence point in your name specifically. Going back to the individual cultural individuality. There's a convergence point in your name, and I changed my name for media. So my name is actually Richard Tumang. It's a Filipino name, Tumang, T-U-M-A-N-G. I shortened it purposefully 15 years ago. I'm kind of throwing a lot of energy out there. Shortened it purposefully like 15 years ago in order to get a website and also kind of like build a brand. But you actively built on your name, but you had a crossroads. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was like you. I was wondering, how do I make my name more palatable to American English? I started thinking about what my name means. My first name, Dometi, means the pillar or backbone of the family, and my last name, Pongo, literally means workhorse. And carrying my name first made me easily Googleable, but also psychologically, it made me feel like I could be my full self on air, which took me several years to do. I didn't know how to be authentically myself and sound professional at the same time. But every time I said Dometi Pongo, I was like, well, I'm forcing myself to be myself rather than put on a persona. Fast forward, when I ended up working at WGN Radio, a more mainstream station, when they would interview me when I first started the job, they were like, all right, Dometi, man, what's up with this name? What's your name mean? And now we begin having a conversation about African culture, what my name means. And it opened up the door. It actually allowed me to relate to more people and more cultures by maintaining my own. And so it was a big learning experience for me.
See, that's so dope. I wish I'd known you 15 years ago. Then maybe I would have had a different approach. No, but for real, and I appreciate you for that. It's so dope. I want to ask one last question about PSG Projects, which I know is a passion project for you, a passion in life for you. You have done an amazing thing, and you have cultural retreats to Ghana, where you take people of West African descent back home to the homeland. You've taken almost 70 people. That's dope. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's important to you?
Man, starting at that Black-owned radio station, they had this program where they would take listeners. It was like how they at radio stations do promotions for cruises and things like that. They had this program where they took listeners to different areas of the world where the African diaspora lived. They'd go to Cuba and seek out the African diaspora there. They'd go to Brazil, but they'd never gone to Ghana, or they hadn't gone in several years. And they were like, wait a minute, Dometi, he's West African, right? Again, the name allowed them to make that connection. And, the tour company contacted me and they said, if you can, let's promote it on air, see if we can get 10 people. Well, that first year, we got 25 people to come with me on this trip. And this was my first time going to Ghana as an adult. I went once when I was 6 years old and I have fuzzy memories, but it was my first time as an adult. And going with these African Americans allowed me to see the country through their eyes and experience these things jointly with them. So it's weird. Alicia touched on this a little bit about that duality you feel where you feel connected to your home country, but apart from it, because I don't speak Ewe or Twi, the home languages, but you want to reconnect and you feel African. I got African art all over the place, got kente cloth out here, but that trip allowed me I felt seen when I got off the plane, because it sounds very simple, but it was amazing to look at billboards and see dark-skinned people on the billboards, to see dark-skinned people filing through the streets, where you have person-to-person interactions and you bump into somebody rude and you're not wondering if they're rude because, of what you look like or anything like that.
You're seeing yourself in everyone else.
Yeah, yes. And it was also great to be with Black Americans to break down those stereotypes. They believe that Africans look down on them and call Black Americans lazy, believe all the stereotypes that are spouted against Black Americans in this country. And conversely, Africans believe that all of the stereotypes that Americans tend to put out there about them, that, these Black Americans would think that we're uncivilized or uncouth or whatever those egregious things are. And it was in a small way, my way of breaking down those barriers and hopefully impacting the lives of those people. And I do have to make one amendment. I thought about this yesterday. It was 69 Black Americans and one white woman who came with me to Africa. And it was also a great learning experience for her, because we toured the slave dungeons and learned firsthand what enslaved Africans had experienced in the torture that they went through on the soil before the ships ever even left African shores. And I think that piece of the story is often missing. We saw it in Amistad a little bit, but a large part of that story is often missing. And it was an experience for me and some of those folks.
Wow, that's an amazing thing for you to be able to share that with other people, and also be able to take them on that journey. And also, it sounds super transformative. As a person who had an opportunity to go back to the homeland as an adult very recently too, I had also a transformative experience. So kudos to you, and you're giving me a lot of life. I'm sure you're giving a lot of others so much life right now.
Man, thank you so much, man. It was transformative for sure. And I went back. I went every year for like 4 years, and each time picked up something new. So hopefully when this COVID thing is all over, I get to go back home again. And hopefully you do too. Hopefully.
Oh, yo, I would love that. Yo, count me in. I'm 71. I'm down.
That's what's up.
That was First Gen Conversation. Thanks everyone at home for joining us. I also want to thank our guests Alysha Lalji and Dometi Pongo for being so open and vulnerable with us and with you at home. For MTV, my name is Rich too, and thanks for watching.